Road trip day. Yeah, road trip days are good. Gets me away from the lake, breaks up my routine. I get to go out and meet people, get to see some people I enjoy, and catch up. Catch up in the greater reselling community. Today's road trip is going to include some footage on change and adapting, because once I got on the theme while I was out, I was surprised at how much change I saw in the area we used to live in and work out of, because that's where I was headed to do the pickup. So it's going to start with an auction pickup, and then we're going to talk a whole bunch about facilities like storage units, transfer stations, hazmat facilities, and businesses that just didn't survive. Because that's the thing about businesses. The longer they continue, the greater they are at risk of closing if they don't adapt. So if you're going to be a successful reseller, one of the traits you need to learn is how to pivot, how to adapt, and how to see opportunity, or to see a closing opportunity that's on the decline, and make sure you're not the one left holding the bag. Road trip day. Follow along. Let's go have some fun. Several hours later. Well, I'm back from the road trip. Today was a road trip day. And as happens on most days I hit the road, with or without Rose, we try to accomplish a few tasks. Today's road trip was about picking up an auction lot. One up in Bremerton, about an hour and 10 minutes away. Now this is Blue Nest. This is the physical storefront operation for the auction that ran Mo and Jack. If I get a minute, I'll shoot some footage inside. But always enjoy coming down to Blue Nest, to their office facility where their retail operation is. The staff is always so pleasant, whether it's here in the office or out at one of their auctions during the pickup process. So when they do a sale like Jack, and the pickup is a week long and it's here in the store, I always look over those lots extra careful because, well, for one thing, I'm familiar with the area they're physically located in. As I mentioned before, their building used to be where my small engine guy was. And it always impresses me to go in there and see what they turned it into after Ed retired, the small engine guy. And of course, next to Ed's operation, the other half of the building was appliance repair place. So if I needed a part for a washer, dryer, or refrigerator, something like that, it was a one-stop shop. In fact, the two rooms were actually connected by an archway back then. It's all been closed off now, and the lease goes to separate operations. So yeah, I had a chance to stop and chat with the operations manager. She had a little time today, so we talked about things like the way she's got to charge me if I have something mailed. Their last auction, I only ended up with one lot, and I had it shipped because they often do their auctions on an island not too far from here. And when the original island streets were laid out and the residences were put in, terrible parking situations, which always creates a challenge for an auction company. It used to be one of the determining factors back when I worked for an auction, and I would go out to scope a job with the auctioneer, and we'd look at it, and one of the things we would consider is where to park the people during a live auction. And often there just wasn't a good answer. Sometimes we could pull it off if everything else was good with a shuttle service to a public parking area like a school. But often it would be the deciding factor between bringing items back to the auction facility or doing an on-site sale. And of course, talking to the operations manager there, she was saying that they're going to start doing some more small quantity themed auctions for pickup there at the office. And that's actually very good for them in a couple of reasons. One is that they get their name out. So if they've got people coming and going, doing multiple pickups over the months, they'll become better known. And it gets people into the retail store. I took a few minutes and just shot a little bit of footage of their retail store. They had some customers, and I didn't want to get the customers in the footage. They may be out buying presents for people. We don't want to give away where they got them from. But yeah, all in all, it's a very nicely run operation. The only problem I've ever had with them was the third-party scheduling software that they use. There was a period there in which it was just flaky. You'd go to try to set up your pickup time and date, and it would error out more often than it would give you an actual pickup slot. Now I just simply try to arrive when the staff does, get my pickup done on an on-site auction, and be gone before the rest of the crowd even comes in to fill their slots. This is the area where I used to rent storage. One of the areas I rented storage. The other one's up the road about 5 miles, and maybe I'll swing by up there and show you the difference. Because from a renter's point of view, when you rent storage, and from a buyer's point of view, when you're going to places to bid on auctions, delinquent storage units, whether they be in person or online, the quality of the storage facility really does have an impact on the items you're likely to find in the storage. A new facility like the one a block from here, its rents are higher. They're just going to be, because their overhead costs are more. And this particular one, when I used it, was owned by a couple, and they had a lot of staff, a lot more than most of these places. A lot of the national chains, you're lucky if they even man the office. You look there and there's a 1-800 number. If you're renting and you rent in a low rent area, it's likely that when the items get put up for sale at auction because of unpaid monthly fees, the items inside may be of a lower value. At least that's my analysis from many storage buys over a 10-year period. But I've got to go right by it as I leave. I'll pull over to the side of the road, shoot some footage. When the gentleman who owned it retired, the couple, they went to Hawaii, as I recall, they had to sell out to a national franchise. So the place is not nearly as attractive as it used to be, even though the colors, the paint scheme, are much gaudier. But when I speak of Montana units, this is the facility that where they were housed. I had a couple of 12 by 40 size units lined with shelving. When I bought delinquent storage units from the operation, it was a matter of simply wheeling the contents from where they were delinquent right over into my unit where they could be processed. A lot of it never even got brought back to CBEC. Yeah, there was a time frame when, yes, even though I had huge buildings in CBEC, I still rented off-site storage. It wasn't a huge pickup. It filled a box in an IKEA bag and had a large loose item, a pet door, a pet safe pet door. We'll take a look at those lots and we'll talk a little bit about them. First item, new in the box wall entry aluminum pet door. Standard type, goes in the wall, goes in the door. Sealed unit, or I wouldn't have bothered, because this is a big item. And big items, of course, mean either Facebook, our own auction, or we'll check them because it is sealed. I could ship it, but I'll have to really watch the price when I compare this. It is a good check, though. If we find out what these are selling for online and we make sure we deduct the shipping cost, we can see whether there's any margin. I only paid $6 plus the fees, so we'll see how that works out. Next is this lot of new old stock right here. Starts with a Midland radio, includes a power adapter, smoke detector, keypad, a blade pack from Stanley, and some hooks, 3M brand hooks. Because these were new old stock, I didn't have any problem paying $8 for the group. I figure the radio alone will return that plus fees. Next down, we have this group of electronics. I like new old stock electronics. You always run the risk that they're off-brand store returns, or that the company that produced them, such as this camera, has a new model out that will cut the value of these items. But sometimes, if you've got a new old stock older item, they sell well because someone's unit has failed and they want to replace it with exactly the same one. And when you've got that one, it can be a good thing. Now, this item includes Sullen battery for a laptop. We've got a tablet and phone stand. As I said, a security camera. We've got one of these quartz LED strip lights. And the items in the middle, this one's a display stand. And this one is some sort of a adapter, as I recall. A Solio quick start adapter. Some of this other product I think is Solio too, so that's an opportunity to make up a group to sell it online. This item includes a Soma Care TEMS unit. Those are those little things that make your muscles twitch to give you exercise. A digital TENS, some accessories for them. Here's some snaps, electrodes. Here's one of the life straws you saw. That'll go in my emergency kit. Glass screen protectors, and some sort of an activity tracker. It's not a Fitbit. It's not an Apple Watch, but we'll see what it's got for value. As we come around here a little further, I ended up with 5 lots of comics, and you can see shooting the side angles that the number of comics in each group varies. You can see it here. But on average, I paid $3 for the one with the Eclipse and Dark Horse, $1 for the first publishing of North Star and Blazing Comics, $6 for the Marvel comics, $7 for the Marvel comics including RoboCop and Conan the Barbarian. Conan's a pretty good franchise. And $1 for the comics that include Bongos, Now Comics, and a Batman pull-out poster. And then, of course, the last lot, which I paid $4 for, is this red binder. But we'll see whether these go back and have any age to them. But since I only paid $4 for the whole binder, I thought I would give it a try. Quite a few cards in the group. I'm not sure what year they go back to. They look like reprints, even though they're black and white photos. The actual cards are done in color on the back, so these probably aren't that old. But anyway, college cards. And that's the group I picked up. Not a huge pickup. Fit in one box, an IKEA bag, and of course the loose door. But we'll do a little investigating on this. Mostly nothing spectacular. In fact, you may look at it and wonder why I bothered. But I like to keep the avenues of communication open with some of these operations. And while I was there talking to their operations manager, one of the first questions I asked her was, "What's coming up? What do you guys have on that I would find interesting?" And she told me about some new smaller auctions they're going to run in-house. She told me about some of the changes that were coming up. And I like to know that. I like to know what's changing in the businesses. Because if you're going to be a successful reseller at whatever level, and you intend to grow your business or downsize your business, finding out what's going on in your community regarding reselling is important. Is there a new auction house? Did somebody shut down? Are the rates changing? Because a lot of this game is played locally. Facebook is a good example. A lot of it's gone international, it's gone national. Companies like eBay, of course, allow you to sell everywhere. But that's not the only venue a reseller can use. The example would be that pet door I just bought. A new sealed box, big box. I probably, if it had not been listed as sealed and unopened, I would have probably not bought it because its size makes it troublesome. But being sealed, I can flip that locally, Facebook. I can send it to another auction because it simply was in a bad venue the first time it sold and I got it. I could put it on a site like eBay. I'll just have to watch. And I did my initial check. Somebody on eBay is trying to get $60 for the unit, $63 shipping. The real question for local selling, though, is what will the Walmarts and the Targets and the Home Depots, what do they get for the equivalent product? Because if somebody can walk in and pay $60 no shipping, then it's not likely that they're going to want to pay plus shipping on an online platform. So I would have to basically subtract the shipping cost from whatever the average local sale price is, and that's what I could expect to achieve out of it. But I can always put it up in one of my auctions. If it's better described, a couple of extra photos, then I can maybe get more out of it than I paid for it. And since I can set the minimum bid price on an auction I'm running, I can make sure that if it sells, there's a profit in there for me. I started taking a look at buildings and how they had changed since Rose and I lived up in that area. I think I mentioned that the building that the auction house runs its business out of, its retail store, and the back room is the auction service. They used to be my small engine mechanics operation. And because that was one of the closest little communities from where we lived, it was also the location for a couple of good restaurants, a grocery store, one of Rose's favorite places to stop for a foo-foo coffee. In the winter, they made her a special kind of coffee she liked. But as I looked around there, starting with the pickup location, I was reminded of how other facilities that I used to use had changed. I was only about a block away from what is now public storage, a rental storage place. But back when we lived there, it was Kitsap Way, and it was where I rented space. They kept a large full-time staff working there so they could take care of you. They also rented U-Hauls, and they could provide packing and shipping materials as well. And in the back side of their office, they had a little shop where you could buy beach things because they were just a few blocks away from one of the nicer freshwater lakes, which is how I ended up buying that boat that was in a $400+ a month heated storage. People who can afford that kind of rent to store their boat, yeah, that's good product. Now this is the facility. You can see it over here. It was always well landscaped, beautiful. Had some additional structures over to the right where people could rent them and park their large RVs in them. It's now public storage. Paint scheme is gaudy, but I used to rent two very large units in this facility, and it was because I was getting so many delinquent storage units. But this was a well-staffed, well-run facility, and it was a pleasure to work with these people. They had two full-time counter attendants, plus the owner, plus maintenance staff, and it was also good use for the real estate itself, because this is a very sloping piece of property, so they could actually build the structure to fit into the hill. And this is where he used state names to number the units. Each wing, each section was a Hawaii or an Alaska or a Montana, rather than just having them be, A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, 4. A good time frame. I bought a lot of units. I bought a lot of stuff. The largest single purchase I ever made, which was a boat, came out of one of these units, because he also offered heated units. And that's where I was talking about. If somebody is going to pay the rent on a heated unit, which was in those days still about $400 a month, then they're going to store better quality items. I'll take you up the road and I'll show you one of the other facilities I used for a while. Pete's Coffee, good coffee. I just got a coffee from the Blue Nest folks. They've put in a pod system there. So as I sit here, I'm drinking a good cup of coffee. Now, just across the street and half a block away from that beautiful storage facility is this building. And this is an interesting building as well. It was a Western tack and clothing store. Back in that time frame when I rented storage, this is where I would drop off saddles, cowboy hats, that type of thing. And it was very convenient because it was right across the street from a regular stop. And I would consign them. I would consign items like cowboy belt buckles and Western shirts, stirrups, chaps, saddles, even cowboy boots when they were in good shape. But yeah, that went on for many, many years, and eventually this facility, as many does, it closed down. And of course, it's now all boarded up. In contrast, if you go a couple of miles down the road and you cross the city limits and go from Bremerton to Silverdale, you find another facility that I used even before the one that's now painted bright orange. That facility represents the older style. It had interior drywall walls, no heat, and limited on-site access and security. But those old units built in the 60s and 70s, they had some drawbacks. One was that they were drywall inside, so you tended to get that unheated, musty smell. Other units of that era, when they weren't built particularly careful, were sumps for any water coming downhill. Now that problem didn't exist at that one, which is now called Olympic. It's changed hands, been renamed. And I may mention it in some of the other clips from earlier today, but when you take a look at the different facilities, the new modern one, metal exterior, metal roofs, metal dividers, very clean, well lit. They would provide you the little hand trucks and carts to move things from the doors to the unit or out of the unit into your trailer. Nice wide aisles, good clean bathroom facilities. Well, in contrast to the older facilities, often they're not well maintained. Sometimes there's just a phone number and no on-site staff. So when there is a problem or you have a question, you have trouble getting hold of management. So the rents are lower, and that's the one thing they have going for them. If you need value-conscious storage, that's the way to go. But it doesn't provide as much security and protection if you're renting storage units. And if you're going to make buying delinquent storage units part of your business model, as it was ours, you have to remember that if people are looking for value-minded storage, as opposed to $400 a month heated storage, the items you're likely to find in those storage units may be on the lower end too. Now I know that's a stereotype. I've pulled fantastic things out of low-end storage facilities, and I've found junk in high-end storage. So I'm not saying it's a hard and fast rule. I'm saying keep it in mind as you bid at these auctions. And once you get to know a given facility, you know what it looks like once you arrive. Initially, if you're bidding online on these auction platforms that are, internet-based, you're not really going to be able to tell what the facility looks like. Is it new? Is it old? Because you're going to see a video or a photo of the storage unit door. And then they're going to roll up the door and take a few photos of what's inside. So those really are a blind gamble, more so than once you get to know a facility. Now this facility, on the other hand, is much older. I'd say it was probably built in the 70s. T111 type exterior, drywall interior walls. And it has an interesting story that goes with it as well, because I used to rent space here, and I used to clear out delinquent storage units here. Now this one sits on a busy corner, just a block up from the freeway, and it's only 10 minutes and a couple of off-ramps away from that beautiful facility I just showed you. This one is much older, much smaller, and it was built in a time frame where customer service was more prevalent. It actually has an apartment on the complex, and a manager actually lived at the residence. So it didn't have gates that locked, it didn't have security keypads, it actually had an on-site presence. Now the units were smaller. In fact, that was an interesting trend At the time, I used to come in and out of this facility routinely. It had been built with a lot of what they call 5 by 10s or 5 by 15s, narrow and long. And they rented cheap, but they weren't really popular because to get to anything that you had stored, you had to move everything in front. And I knew the manager here. His name was Max. And one of the things Max was doing at a particular time frame of this facility's history was he was taking pairs of 5 by 10s or 5 by 15s and he was removing the center wall. He was turning them into larger units because there was a demand for larger units. There wasn't much of a demand for those 5 bys. So whenever he could arrange to get a pair of them empty side by side, he was in the demolition remodeling business. But eventually this facility, and it wasn't always named Glacier West, it was bought out or managed by a bigger chain. One of the first things they did was give Max his notice. And they said, well, we're no longer going to have an on-site manager. That's about the time I decided to leave this facility, and I moved down the road to that larger one and set up shop, the one I just showed you, the orange trim building. Yeah, I simply decided that if they weren't going to have management and they were going to raise the rents anyway, because I started to get letters telling me my rent was increasing significantly. And they hung that letter on the idea that they were improving security. Now, that was almost a joke in the sense that they had just removed the on-site management team, and now they were going to have a gate that closed at night. And I happened to have one of those units that it appeared outside my unit was a video camera surveillance, except since it was my unit, I knew that the wire simply came through a hole in the wall and stopped. So they had hung all these dummy cameras around and then increasing our rent significantly because of the increased security. Yeah, I had some good times here in this unit. Max would give me a call when he had delinquent storage units, and because his occupancy rate was running so high, often he'd simply say, clear them, and for the effort of clearing them, you can have the contents. Of course, one of the jobs I recall was 3 of those 5 bys in a row, and I think I filled one of my single axle enclosed trailers with nothing but mattresses and box springs. I emptied the first unit, then I proceeded to put all the mattresses from all 3 units into one unit, and then when I was done hauling the contents back to the Seebeck house, I turned around and arranged to come back, and that way I gave him back 2 units, and I came back a day or 2 later, and I filled the entire trailer with mattresses and box springs. I was fortunate because in that era, the dump didn't treat them any different than household refuge. So I simply paid the per ton fee to go over the scale and get rid of them. Some of the facilities charge you extra for things like mattresses, white appliances, refrigerators, ovens, stoves, tires, that type of thing. But in those days, mattresses were the same as any other garbage to be dumped. And I kept a large unit. I could occasionally rent one of the small ones if I couldn't empty it in time. But I did a lot of work out of that facility as well. Having an off-site rental storage area is a good place to meet people for pickup of larger items, Facebook pickups, that type of thing. So primarily an off-site storage unit like that for me as a reseller was a good place to stage furniture, dressers, tables, things that I didn't want to bring home. It was also the location of one of the strangest storage units I ever emptied. And if I get a chance, maybe I'll tell you that story, because we'd have to call that one bizarre. All right, I think I'll head up the road and take a look at one more facility if it's still there, because it's a very different spin on renting storage spaces either as part of your business or to store your surplus. And it's a very different type of operation. And if you're going to set up shop and you don't want it at your house, it's viable as long as the rent is within your reach. So this is more of a commercial rental facility. Each of those big roll-up doors is a rented unit. And you'll notice they have a window and they have a man door to walk in. Now these differ a bit from general storage units because they're each set up to be a small business. Inside you'll see an office and you'll see a bathroom, and then you'll have general storage or workspace. And Rose and I considered this particular facility, but the rents were considerably higher than a regular storage unit like the one at Glacier West. But as I mentioned Glacier West, those old facilities, it's true that they will store your space. Some offer heated units, most don't, but they come with some issues. If the interior is drywall, they get that musty old storage smell. Where the new units, like the one that is now public storage, those are made of all metal. The doors are metal, the roll-up doors are metal, the interior partition dividers are metal. So they do a nice clean job of storing. And living here in the Pacific Northwest, I can tell you that not all storage facilities are created equal. You want to watch out for drainage and runoff. I've attended a few auctions where the units, once they rolled up, you could see that the bottom boxes across the entire width of the unit had suffered water damage. Water had come down a hill or a drive, went under the door, and soaked into the contents. So having the lowest unit on a row is not always a good thing. So this facility, like I say, it's really upscale compared to just general storage. Because it comes with an office, you can usually get phone service in it, internet service, and electricity. So you can do more than simply store. Now this building, it's almost stealthy. This is one of my local FedExes, but it doesn't appear in the list of local FedExes. It's one of their sorting centers. But down there at the end, you can see under that little shed roof is the office. And if I'm headed this way, this is where I can drop off a package. Now they're not big and colorful and pretty like many, but it works. And over on this end of the building is where the big 18-wheelers come. So at certain times of the day, this place is just flooded with the little vans all lined up to pick up their routes packages. Little vans arrive in the morning and the big trucks arrive to unload packages. It's a sorting facility. Then they reload the packages for the routes into the little vans, and there's a whole fleet of little vans that leave there. They do run a small operation, which I found by accident one time, because I thought it was maybe the freight service. I thought they'd opened a freight service where you could ship palletized items. No, turned out it wasn't that, but they would take my packages if I came in. But it's one of those operations, one scale, one cash register, a buzzer, somebody comes from the sorting area, accepts your package, says thank you, and no frills. But it was on my route as I came and left, so it would often save me from driving out of my way to go to a FedEx facility, because they're a little sparse in this area. The town I currently live in doesn't even have one. They use a franchise drop point. So while I was in that industrial complex, I thought, hey, I should go by two other facilities that are inherently part of reselling. Once you enlarge your business, once you expand a bit, and your trash cans that you put curbside are no longer adequate to the job of dealing with household trash plus business trash, you've got to step up in your disposal process. So the first facility was that county's Hazmat facility. Now this is another facility that you'll want to become acquainted with in your area if you get into reselling more than casually. This is our Hazmat drop-off. That's where you could drop off fluorescent bulbs, which are always a nuisance when you get them out of storage units because they're probably burned out. Why people store burned out bulbs, I don't know. I guess it's a case of put them away, deal with it later, and they end up taking up space in storage. The problem with that particular facility is one of accessibility. They're not open like 8 hours a day, 6 days a week. So you got to know their schedule. Because I used to like to drop off the Hazmat on my way to the transfer station, what we now call the dump. It's not like an old-fashioned dump where a landfill, but it's the modern version of where to get rid of bulk trash. But the hazmat facility would take things like paint, solvents, fluorescent bulbs. They had a regular list. You could check it on the website. And you probably have one in your area. The question is how far you've got to go to dispose of those things. But when you're pulling out, say you're doing an estate clear out, or you're clearing out your own garage, you're going to find things like old oil paint and solvents. Getting rid of them in a good, safe manner is often a challenge. Well, that facility takes it when they're open at no cost to you. But sometimes they put limits on how much you can bring. Because if we were doing a clear out on an estate, we could easily sometimes fill the back of a pickup truck bed, and they don't want that much volume at once. So when you have that much volume, it's best to call ahead, explain the situation to them, and sometimes they'll make an exception. Otherwise, you got to take them some, and then on another day, take them some more. But hazardous material disposal becomes an issue if you're a larger reseller sourcing in general categories from delinquent storage units, clearing estates, or helping your Uncle Max get ready to downsize. All right, so we go down the industrial complex road a little bit further, and I pulled into the transfer station. Now, I did it in that order for a couple of reasons. One is I knew they had a honey bucket there, and after being on the road all morning, I needed to make a stop personally to get rid of some waste. That's the scale here at the waste facility. Yeah, this is what passes for a dump in our counties. They call it a transfer station. It's run by a big operation called Waste Management. In fact, the same company picks up my roadside service. But this is where you bring bulk. They've got the scale, your weight going over, your weight coming back. It's also where the recycling is. And of course, I stopped while I was here at the facility to dump some waste of my own because I knew it was here. But over in those big buildings over there, you drive in with your truck or your trailer or your car after you've gone over the scale, and you get rid of your waste, and then your weight again as you leave. It's also where the electronic disposal is. Here in this county, which is Kitsap, which is over the county line from where Rose and I are now living, this is where you can bring obsolete televisions and computers, and they don't charge you. You pull over before you go into the building to dump your yard waste and your garbage cans, and you basically, for dropping it off, they let you do it and they don't charge you. Other places you actually end up paying a fee for that service. But this is also where you can drop off your cardboard, your glass, all the things that if you're a recycler or a reseller, you're going to encounter. Once your operation gets much bigger than what your household garbage cans can do, you're going to have to decide, do you rent a dumpster? Do you bring the items in bulk to a transfer station like this? It's going to become a regular part of your business. Especially so in the years we cleared storage units and bought estates. So right as you're doing the pickup, you want to be able to start sorting that type of material. Because anytime you can get rid of cardboard, glass, scrap metal, oil, batteries, and you can do it without paying, that's a bonus for your business. As I was saying earlier when I was over by the storage facilities, mattresses, furniture that has no chance at all of selling, those are things that you're going to have to pay by the pound to dispose of. And in some places, they charge you extra for those oversized items. This is one such place. If you bring refrigerators, stoves, what they call, white appliances, you're going to end up paying extra. I've got a yellow jacket in here, so we'll see whether or not he clears. But when we load the trailers to come to this facility, we would load them with the garbage and the waste up front, because that would be going into the last place we stopped. You pull in here, and recycling is off to one side. So at the back end, at the door end of either a truck or trailer, that's where we would put the cardboard and the bins of glass and the items we knew we could recycle. They'd be dropped off, and then we'd continue on over the scale and do the rest of the job. Depending on how many storage units we were clearing, we typically do 1 or 2 trailer loads a month to this place. This was the closest one to our Seebeck location. Now we have it picked up curbside because our operation is much smaller, though we still take things like scrap metal to a facility on our side of the county line. And we'll head on to our next location. I seem to be doing a tour of facilities and buildings in Kitsap County. Yeah, now this was my old stomping ground, so these were the facilities I used as the years passed. And waste management is all over our region. In fact, I think they're nationwide. You see the big yellow and green WM logos on the trucks. You see them picking up curbside. You see them delivering dumpsters to businesses, because that's one of the things they can do. They can provide multiple levels of service at the same facility. If you have a can, because you're only doing a little bit of reselling, and you put it out curbside, so say you have a week where you have 2 cans, well, you can make a phone call, they'll pick up the extra can, and they'll charge you for that curbside service. Now, you're going to pay more per cubic foot or pound than you would using their other services, but convenience, and you're being charged for convenience. So the next step up, rent a small dumpster. And we considered that when we were in Seebeck, because they'd bring a truck, they'd pick up the dumpster on a regular schedule, and you'd pay a monthly fee for the dumpster. Now, because we were sourcing in a cyclic nature, we never knew how often or how many dumpsters a month we were going to use. So we took the other approach. We simply sectioned off one of those metal carports, and we got a whole bunch of trash cans, which of course we pulled from clearing estates. I think I had about 20 at one time. And we would stage the trash, the recycling, the cardboard. We would put it all in this area, bound up and banded. And then when it looked like I had about a trailer load, we'd load it in closed trailer, we'd run it over the facility, go over the scale, and then we'd stop and we'd drop off any electronics, because they didn't charge you for the electronics. You could get rid of the old TVs and the computers. And they also didn't charge you for glass, plastic, cardboard, so you could eject all that stuff before paying the scale weight. And then you'd go down inside the building, back up your truck or back up your truck and trailer. A little congested sometimes, but the single axle trailers were great for that. It took less room to maneuver them. And you back it up, you eject it all onto a cement floor, and then every so many hours they blow a whistle, stop the inbound cars, and a giant trash bucket loader would come and push it all to the back of the building, and it would go somewhere else, and sorting would happen. So unlike a landfill where there was just a giant hole, and they'd fill it, put dirt over it, and dig another hole, these are all done indoors. And it's a nice thing in the Pacific Northwest because you're out of the rain while you're unloading. Of course, summer, July, August, it can smell a bit ripe in that building because you never know what the guy next to you is dumping. But you pay by the pound for most things. You pay by a pound for all the household waste, busted up furniture, garden waste. You get charged extra and declare it at the scale if you've got things like old tires, appliances, washers, dryers, if you've got tires. And there's a rate. Now, a lot of times those same facilities will have an annual amnesty. And what they do is, because they're running the dump trucks as well as the transfer station and the curbside, they send you out a letter or an email that says, on this day, we're going to send trucks around, and if you put out your items we'd normally charge you for, we'll provide the service. And I think it's part of their contract with the county. And you could get some of that larger stuff taken away at no specific extra cost. It's a good service. Okay, so then as we're traveling around, our next stop of the day, and you may see these a bit out of order as I run the clips, but the next stop was an auction house I thought I'd make one more stop on the way to get some lunch. We're still in Kitsap County. This old blue pole barn, this was run by an acquaintance of mine. It was an auction house. And unlike the big facility I worked for, he would run weekly auctions. And he did that because of the size of the building. He started out as a regular auction house, and he would take box lots from me, small tools, that type of thing. That's how I got to know him. We became friendly. I would fill in for him when he needed additional staff. But this little building kept a family of husband, wife, and sister occupied, running the business. And as he got into the business further, and auctions became routine for him, these were in-person auctions, he began expanding. He would occasionally go out and do an on-site job, and he got into doing storage facilities, including this one that I just photographed over here, because he's co-located on the same driveway. So I would go and I would do storage unit auctions with him, and I'd work as a spotter for him, and occasionally I'd buy something. In fact, one of the most dramatic auctions I ever attended was the first one Brandy went with me. It's an interesting story. Maybe I'll get her to tell it at some point. But this facility used to also run swap meets. They'd use this large parking lot here, and in the summer, they'd set up tents and booths, and he'd run a swap meet. It was just another way between auctions for him to take a commission off of the sellers and help pay his rents. He was also one of the first auctions in the area that used an online proxy bid service. It was kind of a hybrid for him. He'd have 100 people there in the building, and he'd have online bidders. And the people present would bid against the online bidders. He would even sell guns and firearms, pistols that way. Of course, they had to be processed through a proper registration operation, but he had one of those guys on call. So the interesting thing about many of these businesses I've showed you today is how over time they've changed. Some have been boarded up, some have been closed down. This building's been sitting empty for some time. But almost all of them have changed as technology has changed. COVID made the decline of some happen faster. They shifted their businesses online. In fact, the last time I saw the auctioneer for this facility, that's what he'd done. Some health reasons caused him to decide to get out of the carrying and lifting, and he went to a smaller office size operation and shifted his focus entirely online with smaller objects. And I understand that concept because that's what Rose and I are engaged in doing. But this facility over here, in addition to being a storage complex, was also our local U-Haul rental place. But today I no longer see any signs for U-Haul. But even though I owned a couple of trucks and 4 trailers, a couple flatbeds, 4 enclosed trailers, when I had a call for a big truck, this is where I'd often pick it up. It's convenient to me. It's right there on the highway. In fact, you can hear the highway noise. But that also made it a good location for an auction. His signs out front meant that people who didn't know he was a regular auction company would see his sign that said auction today, and he'd pick up the occasional customer that way as well, because location in the reselling business is important. All right, I think I'm going to go down into town, get some lunch, and then head back out to the lake. And because of its size, they ran weekly consignment auctions, and they did it for a number of years. And I would occasionally help out over there and fill in. And when they opened, like I've mentioned about many auction houses, they were pretty much willing to take lots from smaller sellers. Table saws, boxes of things, books. In those days, I had no desire to sell individual books. So those my son-in-law didn't want would go into a box and go to this facility. As they got better at it, more skilled, they learned the same lesson that many resellers do, whether you're running an auction or selling out of your back room. They learn that the amount that has to be made per square foot of storage space needs to increase over time. If you want the capital to source better items, you need to be able to make more off the things you're selling. So he would begin to say, well, I don't want just box lots. And it's like, well, okay, I'll start mixing it up. I'll bring you some good tools because your crowd size is increased. Your customer base has more money. They're willing to spend more because you're more established. So I would bring him mixed truck and trailer loads, especially if I was just clearing out a storage unit or doing a bigger pickup at an estate. I could then bring him individual items to sell as lots and box lots. He was a bit of an entrepreneur in that sense. Even though once he had kind of figured out the basics of the auction, he started looking for other things he could do from the facility that were similar, complemented it, got more people through his doors, and drew more attention to his business. It's that growth phase. So in the summers, he would run a monthly swap meet out in the parking lot. And Rose and I went over there a couple of times and set up tents and sold, as did many of his regular customers. They would bring things and they would sell, and it was a great spot for traffic. Terrible place to record sound for a YouTube video, but lots of traffic. In fact, I remember hearing more than one accident where somebody slowed down to read his sign and consider pulling in, and the person behind them didn't. So you'd hear these crashes. That's the same highway that comes down through our area, Highway 3, and it's known for, it's a 2-lane in most areas, and it's known for additional incidents. So often you've got to add extra time in when you're going to a set appointment, because you never know where there's going to be an accident along that way, and it's going to slow down. But he was also one of the first auctioneers I met who really embraced the idea of online auctions. And he did it in an interesting hybrid fashion. He'd sit up at his dais at the front. His ringmen would hold up items or turn to point to an item. They weren't all small enough to be held up. But he'd describe the item. The clerk would be sitting next to him on a laptop, and they would take bids from people online. He had an online group of bidders bidding against the people physically present in his auction house. And it really expanded his audience because that building could only hold about 100 chairs with all the product lined up around the perimeter. So he began doing these hybrid auctions. 2 or 3 auctions a month were just local. 1 would be a hybrid. And he would hold the things over that had even more value than normal. Firearms, jewelry, coins, because all that stuff could be shipped. And it would command enough additional revenue to justify it. Because in those days, hiring a company like ProxyBid to collect the off-site payments and to deal with the shipping, yeah, that added some effort to his staff. And the next day or two after the auction, that's what his wife and sister-in-law would be doing, would be packing items that had been bought by off-site bidders and sending them out across the country. And like I said, he was one of the first I ever saw do it. And that went on for quite a while. Eventually, he had some health issues. There were some market changes. I think COVID was probably one of the things that made sure he went out of business and that business sat empty. We stopped and we took a look at that. On the same road that accesses that blue barn that's no longer occupied by anybody is another storage facility. And in that storage facility, it was interesting today that it looked almost deserted, because it used to be a big U-Haul rental place as well. So there were always trucks and trailers parked all over where I filmed. And it's where I used to pick up a truck if I needed one. Because even though I had 2 trucks and 4 enclosed trailers and 2 flatbeds, sometimes a job would pencil out to make more sense to rent a big U-Haul truck. Back when we were setting up estate sales and would have to bring the volume of the unsold items back locally, if the distance was very far, it made more sense to do the sale, assess what was left, rent an appropriate sized truck, and make one trip. Fully load everything into a U-Haul, bring it back, unload it at our facility, and then return the truck. Because you could do a one-way rental, and the U-Haul truck got about the same miles per gallon as my silver 3/4 ton. So what would take me 2 or 3 trips, I could put in a big cube van, a U-Haul, and do it in one. So you saved the time driving, and you saved on the extra trip, on the fuel cost for the extra trip. Of course, I never liked the ramp loading arrangement on those bigger U-Haul trucks. I found low deck trailers to be much easier to load and unload. So yeah, that facility had also changed. So I guess the interweaving thought today is how much change had occurred since we moved away from that area. And it's not just those businesses, but development. The other day I was having a conversation with somebody who let me know that the old Wagaway curve, the big curve out in between Silverdale and Bremerton, it used to be a golf driving range, a miniature golf area. And in the fall, it was where the big corn maze. So when our granddaughters were younger, we used to take them to that corn maze. But it was really a rural area. And I guess all that's been leveled now, and they're going to put another one of those big cookie cutter subdivisions in there because the real estate was worth more than either the corn crops or what the operators were making with miniature golf and driving ranges and corn mazes being seasonal. But yeah, the kids really liked those when they were young. Now, of course, they're both off to college, so the maze is probably just learning their campuses. Adapting to change. It's one of the things a successful reseller has to learn to do. Now, the purpose of today's road trip was to pick up some auction lots from a local auction house that ran a sale last week. But as I went into that building, I was once again reminded how that building used to be something else. And as long as I was on the road and I had some time and Rose was out of town, I decided to hit a few other stops on the way home, on the way out to get some lunch, and take a look at the aspects of change as it relates to facilities and businesses. So we started with the Blue Nest building. Used to be something else. We went on and took a look at a couple of buildings that are still storage facilities, but they're under new management, new ownership, and that brought change. Then, of course, we stopped and we took a look at a recycle center, what to do with the waste produced by change. A hazmat facility. As long as I was in the same industrial park, I shot a little footage of FedEx because over time, the post office no longer carries all my packages. That's change. As I went down the road towards the industrial complex, I drove past the new Amazon facility. That certainly signifies change. All those Amazon vans making deliveries. It's interesting that FedEx and Amazon are probably within 3 blocks of each other. Amazon's a much newer, bigger operation. But I went into the facility. We took a look at the recycling center, the transfer station. The biggest thing I've ever sent through that transfer station was the single-wide trailer on the building site on Misery Point. When it was time to clear that trailer because we were ready with the occupancy permit for the new house, I thought I had it given away, which would be the perfect upcycling or recycling for a young couple who needed a place to live. Didn't work out. Had to have it crushed, and it went to that same waste management facility in a 90-yard side loader dumper. That facility, waste management, also signifies change. They started out as a little operation. Eventually, they got a lot of the contracts for counties in our area, and now they have facilities all over. Well, they're versatile. They provide the trash cans I use at the house for curbside pickup. In the years we cleared storage units and estates, they took trailer loads over the scale. They were the bulk dispersal for trash and for, recycling like cardboard. Well, you saw the big trucks come through as I was there, and like I say, they took my single-wide trailer. They also have commercial contracts. There's a different lane if you're a commercial dumper, if you're getting rid of household recycling like we do. Yeah, they're a big operation. They moved into electronic disposal. So if you've got old computers or you've got old TVs, they handle that as well. You've probably got something similar in your area. And if you expand as a reseller, you'll want to learn that because the price per trash can is a lot steeper than bringing a truckload. They're also often a place for metal recycling, and you don't end up paying in many locations. We use a different facility which takes ours closer to the house now, but I just passed a third opportunity. It's a traditional automotive junkyard, a place where you get your parts for cars. Well, they have a big dumpster outside, and it says, free metal, so you can drop the metal there. But another thing about big places like Waste Management and the reseller, when you start out small and you're using your household cans, you pay by the week or you pay monthly for pickup by the week. Well, they'll also be your dumpster rental place if you decide to go the dumpster route. But I always found the dumpster route to be much more expensive. So we would simply set it aside, fill up trash cans. I probably had 20 trash cans in those days, plus the recycling bins, and then we'd take it by a trailer load, pound for pound, bringing it to them, and going over the scale and paying by the trailer load was the best deal. Change, it's a constant. The idea that I'll be going back to the house and picking up a package that came in the mail from the same facility I just picked up in person is another interesting change. I now have packages from auctions mailed to me. That was something I never considered, 5 or 10 years ago, because I would be right there on site picking up volumes. Well, now sometimes when it's small lots or single lots, it's actually more productive. Saves me the time to drive out and do the pickup. Fees vary, so make sure you are aware of the fees before you buy. But in some situations, it makes more sense to have the lot shipped to me than to spend the fuel to go out and the time to go out and pick them up. Versatility and change. Important aspects for a reseller if you're going to be successful in this game. I'm Brian. It's after lunch. I'm getting hungry. I'm going to go in and get something, and then I'm going to head out to the lake. It's getting on to be about 4 o'clock. I haven't done much in the way of reselling today beyond making the road trip. I did send out offers today, about 24 offers today I sent them out. I haven't checked the laptop yet to see whether I had any solds from those offers, but there's always that possibility. My packages went out to the curb this morning and were picked up. If you're interested in topics like curbside postal pickup, there are videos in the playlist. If you're interested in other auction pickups, there are videos in the playlist covering a wide range of topics about reselling, and I'm going to make some more. You're looking at one now. And I've got dozens I've shot the footage for, but they haven't been edited. If there's a topic you're particularly interested in, send me a note. Let me know, and I can pull one of those and move it forward in the list. Otherwise, I'll get to them as I get to them in some sort of rotation. This is Brian, Cabin Fever Reselling. I'm at the lake. Thank you for watching. Enjoy your day.